Hi. So today I want to do two different talks, or there are two different talks prominent on my mind. I will at least do this talk. Maybe after this is done and uploading, I'll meditate on the other one and do that one tomorrow. I don't know. But this is a two-part series on power or energy. This talk today is on the power of God, divine power or energy. I am going to try and describe for you both kinds of energy or power. I'm going to make a distinction between the two and try to give you something useful to build on for you to do this work as well. Because one of the cornerstones to this work is that I am not unique. There are plenty of other minds just like mine that are working at this on these subjects at this extreme end of it. We are going to make mistakes, but we are going to make discoveries. My job must be to give tools to people who work like this so that they can make their own discoveries. Because if I am not unique, but if I am powerful, and my goal is to further this work, I need to lay down some distinctions. So this talk is on divine power. I want to talk about, to start this off, I have to go off of what we can discover here in our environment. So I'm going to start off with the problem of time scale. To put things in perspective, my work focuses on pretty much the development of our consciousness, our mind, over the last 3,000 years or so. We live in an environment on a planet where there is becoming more and more evidence that there was likely a civilization here prior to the Younger Dryas, the Ice Age. That whatever remnants there were of that civilization are now gone, and that there were survivors of that ice age, and in the Younger Dryas, things like Göbekli Tepe were built in order to sort of kickstart our civilization again, amongst those who survived. This is a problem when it comes to timelines of creation, but it's not a problem to the power of God. See, this civilization, all this footprint that we're trying to interpret into a foot, into a boot, all of this that's scattered across our planet, what you have to realize about that planet is this planet is a Dawkinsian good move for the growth of consciousness. That's not to say that it's the only type of model planet that is conducive to the growth of consciousness or mind, but from what we understand, this is a very good place to do it. To have done it more than once over this planet's long history, it seems like a no-brainer to me, like that's an obvious place to do it. We think Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, I believe, is around 11,600 years old, and it is built by technologies that resemble other megalithic structures on this planet, built in a way that we cannot explain how it was done. We could slightly replicate some of their construction methods, but it would require such energy and cost that it's not feasible for us to do it at this time. Maybe that would change if we went down a more green energy mimetic path to technology. I can't say that because we're not there. There are, and I am certainly no expert, but there are ancient tablets and texts on this planet that indicate what came before was built by people not from this planet. These things are not relevant to my work. Whatever they were is now long gone. If I am talking to somebody who does see life that way, like the Anunnaki are an important influence on us in some way, forgetting the idea that you can't actually prove the Anunnaki. Well, let's say I'm talking to somebody like that. The Anunnaki tablets, their writings indicate that they were concerned that what they did here would get them anger from what they called the Creator God. The Creator God, or as I see it, universal consciousness. And I don't mean universal as in everything, I mean that too. But I mean the entire universe, whether that includes multiple dimensions, realities. Of course, it has dimensions, at least 3 different dimensions. But alternate dimension states, or multiple realities, or many world theories. I mean that universal consciousness or mind. That is my concern. That's my work. It's not that I originate this work. I am taking up the work of other people. If you are someone who believes in these ancient tablets and the Anunnaki and their influence on us as a species, I am not concerned with their beliefs, their intentions. I'm more concerned with the intentions of what seems to be a player later on in our history, a Creator God. It's not just remnant infrastructure like Göbekli Tepe, but there are signs of technology on this planet that we cannot replicate today. Now maybe the technology or insight has been lost over just as small a time period as 6,000 years. But I think that the accumulative weight of all of this evidence points to a reciprocal cycle of civilization. And as I said, this planet represents a Dawkinsian good move for such things to happen. If I had a universe to play with, this is a place I would play with. So let's bring that all the way up into something. See, I like to focus on biblical history because that's what I've been most exposed to in my life. That is the greater part of my mimetic backstory. Having said that, let's start with the biblical beginning in the Garden of Eden. If what we discover on this planet proves to push back the Garden of Eden to the Younger Dryas, theoretically, I can't prove any of this. Nobody can really argue against it. I don't know what influences were on that garden. I did a video, The Tree. It was a good video. I liked that talk. I would recommend checking out that talk. Discussing the biological makeup of that tree, the purpose of that tree, what was the plan for that tree, what was the plan for that garden, what was the plan for the things that we found in that garden. I'm not arguing the factual evidence of the garden one way or the other, but I am definitely one that would speculate and ruminate and meditate on the subject. So let's just start there, because for me, when it comes to biblical history, that garden represents the start of a kind of consciousness or mind that I am very much interested in. We were one thing. That one thing had something affect it. According to biblical history, that is a tree, it was a lie, and it was a consuming of a fruit. Like I said, check out the talk on the tree. That was a great talk. But this, for me, is where our history, our personal history, begins to interact with this Creator God, the one the Anunnaki feared, or the only God that ever was, or there's no way for me to prove that. But this is where I start to get my interest here, where work on our iteration of consciousness begins. Where it really begins is the fall. What history shows us, or what has See, it's hard to pin down what words I should use to describe the fall because it is very much a part of very many of us, a high percentage of the population of our species. The fall of humanity is something that is in our mimetic backstory. Whether you agree with it or not, this is where my work has to start. Because if we were one thing and we fell and became something else, that Creator God was still interested in the arrow of progress. There was still a plan. There was a destination that was predetermined, that was picked for us. This is the direction I want this creation to go in. And there were actions, steps taken to make that happen. I think that this is evidence of design in purpose. I think the text of the Bible gives us historical evidence of what that Creator God, whose attention we have, was doing with our species. There are actions, like the Younger Dryas is what I suspect will most likely be pegged as the origin of the global flood. I don't know why it's described as 40 days. But then again, there are a lot of things that God tried to explain to our species that he just cannot explain because we didn't have the competence, the capacity to bring it in. I'll touch on that a little bit later in this talk. But, so there's evidence of, let's say, the flood. That is an instance I take as this Creator God interacting with us. How about things like Sodom and Gomorrah? Sodom and Gomorrah is a historical documentation, supposedly. I don't know for sure. It's hard for me to know for sure because I am not an archaeologist. I am not a theologist that has gone to the Middle East and walked around. I know that it's very hard for us to find Sodom and Gomorrah, historically speaking, contextually speaking. But we have this written account of these two cities that had fallen into decadence. What I would consider a selfish mimetic path had entrenched itself in this civilization. A lot of what people seem, or what Christians seem to focus on in Sodom and Gomorrah is homosexuality. That to me isn't the thing that was happening here. To me, what was happening here was this selfish mimetic path had taken root in these people, and everything they did, their entire focus of the growth of their minds was based in selfishness. There are other parts in the Bible that talk about how Sodom and Gomorrah happened because they had lack of charity. I think it was a selfishness, a greed, and a lust, because these things are quite similar, chemically speaking. All right, something else. What else? We got Lot. No, not Lot. Job. Job is an example of something that really stressed me out for a long, long time. I could not find my way to make peace with the idea that had been given to me when I was a kid of God, and simultaneously associate him with the acts that happened in the book of Job. But when I read that book now, I learn so much more because I understand things from a different perspective now. I understand them from a perspective of, we were once one thing. We are not that thing anymore. There is a directionality and purpose that is inherent in the plan, and this is prior to the great work of that God in our species. When you listen to Job's friends, you're sitting around the fire. They're sitting around the fire. All this tragedy has happened to Job. And his friends are very, you can almost hear in their speech the intellect and the desire to do what is expected of them and to do it good, to serve their God. But there's no empathy in their speaking. And even when God comes to Job, it's not from an empathetic perspective. This is something that is lacking in our species at this time. It will be the great work But at this time in our history, it's not. And what God is trying to interject into our species is the understanding that this life isn't going to be fair. It never was fair. It's not designed to be fair. It never will be fair. How fair it is largely on our shoulders. You think it's not fair that you are sick, you are poor, you are overweight, you are out of shape. You think that it's not fair that this is where your life has taken you. But that isn't on divine power. That is on our power. We have this world. We have this information. We have all this data. What is not fair about this life is on us. That is the point of that book and that entire interaction. I suspect, and I cannot know this for sure, but I suspect when God was interacting with us at those times, he was still formulating his plan, figuring out how and when he wanted to make his plan, put his plan into motion. Because that plan starts, the great work of the Creator God in our species starts around 3,000 years ago, when there is a selected group of human beings who are historically reported to be in servitude. God selects that group of people and he decides, I am going to start my work here. I'm going to make an example, and the example he makes is all shock and awe. I mean, today maybe it'd be bombs, but back then it's frogs and locusts and water turning into blood and firstborn children, sons, dying overnight, all at once. It is all shock and awe. It is a punctuated period in history. I am going to make an example. I am going to start my work, and my work is starting right here. So he takes this section of humanity that he has set aside as an example, and he makes them wander for 40 years. This is a generational change. The generation that left Egypt had a mimetic path in their mind that made them one way. But after a generational change of walking through the wilderness, the mimetic path that the descendants have is far different than that of the people that left Egypt. And on this path, if you go into the historical records of the Bible, God gave them a specific outline of how he wanted them to conduct their minds. 10 Commandments, written in stone. This is new. This is new to human consciousness. Monotheism is not something that happened before this. This is the start of that. 3,000 years ago. God can still use his power to influence our species. He doesn't require us to be monotheistic to do that. He can do it polytheistically, anytheistically. He can do it. But this work started, and in our species started, the monotheistic perspective. And during this trip through the wilderness, there is evidence, things that used to also bother me before about, like, well, God said, do not kill in the 10 Commandments, but then he sends his people out to wipe out these people, and he gives them very specific guidelines, like only save virgin girls, whatever. He is wiping out genetic and mimetic timelines. The mimetics, the consciousness, the mind of those people is being eliminated. The genetic structure of those people is being eliminated. Those are two important building blocks that God uses to create the universe, to grow the universe, to sustain the universe. These are cornerstone building blocks of our universe. I suspect there's a third, that is energy, the physical, the mental, and energy. I believe that there's a third, probably more. I think the third will probably be the one, the energy will be the third we discover. Anyways, we're talking about generational changes. This is the beginning of the work. In the beginning of the work, genetic and mimetic bloodlines are being eliminated and an example is being set. The Creator God takes this selected group of humans, generations after their liberation. He gives them structure and form, things to replicate, from sacrifice to legal codes to plots of land, how he wants them distributed amongst different tribes. And he gives them specific guidelines and is merciless in holding them to it. This is how I want you to live. This is the example I want set. And if you fall away from it, generations in slavery. Oh, you're free again. Here's the example. Follow my example. You are an example to the rest of the human beings on this planet. Follow it. Oh, you're not following it anymore. Slavery again. This goes on for 1,000 to 1,200 years. Until the culmination of the work. See, according to the mystery schools or the secret history, the work that ends in Jesus Christ was planned for. Like all of the magic, all of the miracles, all of the prophets, everything from Moses to Jesus was all in preparation for this culmination of the work. According to the mystery schools and secret societies, and this covers the entire globe, from Asian secret societies to Indian secret societies to the ones that are in Russia, the secret societies of the world, according to their understanding, and I am not initiated, so I could be wrong, the entire solar system, the engine of our solar system, all of that magic, all of that prophecy, all of that work culminated in Jesus Christ being with us in our form as he walked the earth. That was everything that led up to him, and everything he was capable of doing while he was here was the culmination of all of this focused energy. I'm not really a fan of that. I think that given what we're starting to understand about what must be the scope and scale of power that God has access to, I think that sets certain limitations on it that I'm not entirely comfortable with. But I offer this up because I want you to see that it is not just a select group of people that are the focus of this work. Anybody has access to being a part of this work. The entire point of the work was to save or to advance in a specific direction our species. Think of the environment in which the culmination of this work takes place. The culmination being that God takes on our form, experiences our struggles, experiences our biochemistry, our hormonal imbalances, all of that. He does it at a time when, remember, the work is to introduce empathy into our species. So he does it at a time when there is no such thing. He does it at a time where the peak civilization of our planet is crucifying thousands and thousands of people. There was a rebellion, the Spartacus Rebellion. After the Spartacus Rebellion was put down, there was something like 1,000 miles or whatever the hell it was, but this huge stretch of road. And every 100 feet there was another cross with another former slave dying or dead on it. There's a very cruel world that is going on right now that the work culminates in. Think of the work as he's doing it. God has a replicator. The mental replicator is mimetic. My discovery of this went through a man named Julian Jaynes's work and his hypothesis of bicameral mind. His understanding of how our consciousness formed was in the repetition of metaphor. I had the advantage of the perspective of time in that I could utilize Richard Dawkins' work in memetics and understand that metaphor is essentially a meme. It is memetics. It is a memetic function. That is how consciousness derived for Janes and was explained by Dawkins in me to you. And look at how Jesus interacted with the people. When doing miracles, it was always about empathetic miracles. It was healing, it was feeding. And think about when he did feed. He said, all right, this is the food we got, pass it out. And they passed it out and it just fed people. He didn't dwell on it and say, look at my loaves and fishes, everybody. This is my power. He fed them and then fed them mental replicators in the form of metaphor. Over and over and over again, he speaks in parable because he understands the replicator he used to build our minds. Again and again, we missed the point and we focused on these things when this is where our focus should have been. He never used a metaphor or a parable to explain the power that was underneath his feet. We're talking about the Middle East. Some of the largest oil reserves in the world are under their feet. But that metaphor or parable would have done them no good. Think of the environment that the culmination of this work took place in. Think of the mistakes that those without empathy made in interacting with God in the form of Jesus Christ. Look, we are in a position now where scientifically we can understand our universe to a point where if God has the properties that I understand him to have, the actual taking form as a human isn't even all that complicated. To live that life, to do that work, isn't something that's on an overly complicated scale. It's something that we can understand today. That probably gets a little bit more complicated than I want to go in this talk, but the filling of a human body with a specific mind is something that we could meditate on and understand today. It's not something our scientists can replicate. I'm not even certain. I believe that we brought back the dire wolves. Maybe we did. I'm not the scientist that can tell you one way or the other. Either way, the point of this talk at this area, the culmination of the work in Jesus Christ, his addition of empathy to the structure, to the mimetic structure of our organic process, that is mind, that is consciousness. He did his work, died, resurrected, went on to speak to other people according to the text. And for 2,000 years now, that work has just been simmering in our species. For 2,000, look at the slow rollout of this work. It has so far taken us 2,000 years to get to the point where I am talking to you. For our understanding, for our compassion, for our empathy to grow to such a point where we can identify with the struggles of other people. We can make that understanding a part of our own understanding. We can learn from each other. We can grow from each other. We can help one another. 2,000 years of this slowly adapting, our species adapting to the introduction of empathy. I suspect that slow rollout is on us. It's our fault. It's not that the work is going to take that long. It's that the work had to coincide with this thing called religion. Everything we misunderstand about the work is turned into a religion. Religions in and of themselves, the religious state of mind is ego-based. God does not require blood sacrifice. We required that to grow. God does not require cathedrals. We do that. That's our ego. God does not does not require this formulaic, if you don't understand it the way I understand it, then you're not really in the club. That's not something that's required by God. That's us. That's us imposing. I think that religion is the need to know that you know the truth. I have the truth. Religion grows out of that. Once we know we have the truth, and that is situated in our ego, and it grows from our ego, that's where I see religion. I mean, and it seems more obvious in the religion of macroevolution, in that once that religion started, everything from that point on, everything that reinforces it, everything that structures the world we show each other to fall in line with it, everything about that religious structure says ego to me. And the ego that is at the bottom of macroevolution seems to me to get away from the supernatural powers that were believed in before. In other words, not the work. They aren't trying to get away from the work. They're trying to get away from the religion. And to get away from the religion, they formed their own religion. That's pretty much how humans work. We did things to try and keep empathy moving forward. I think that another thing that was put on us, one of the benefits we got out of religion, was humility. I think as you are growing, especially as you get to start growing with the power we are now, if you don't have that humility, if you just let, I know the truth, my ego is certain, and let that run without any humility, I think that is probably what has hindered our growth, why it has taken 2,000 years. Because scientific revolutions happened before the Enlightenment. The Arabs had a scientific revolution that was completely lost to history. For whatever reason, the scientific revolution starts, and as it matures, see, this all grows out of our trying to understand, to better understand and identify with the power that is God. And it really takes on a different religious tone. See how science starts with the religious tone to begin with? It makes a discovery with Charles Darwin and others, and immediately branches off and starts its own flavor of religion. The world itself hasn't changed. The data itself hasn't changed. Our structuring of that data is what has been added to start this new religion. None of this discovery, none of this truth, none of this religion, none of this ego, none of it affects the plan, the actual work that is still ongoing. Let me try to explain the simmering of empathy in our species as it exists alongside the ego structure that is religion. To do this, I want you to think of fellowship. When it comes to fellowship or being a member in a church, there are certain undertones that are readily identifiable. The kind works, the compassion, the charity, the love, the advice, the nurturing, the educating, the discovering, and the forgiveness that comes with that fellowship. That is empathy simmering its way through our species, through time in our species. Because alongside it, we have these religious structures. Like when you want to recognize the religious structures, start recognizing things like the groupthink that happens within these organizations, within the religions, within the fellowship. Because you can simultaneously be allowing empathy to simmer in your species and show all these acts of compassion, love, and kindness, and still be convinced to vote for the torturing of a human being in a prison that is far removed from your immediate vicinity. How does charity above all is the greatest of any state of mind we can be in as a human being. And yet, that same person who holds that value to be true can vote to torture, can vote to kill in war. That is the groupthink that you can associate with the religious aspect of fellowship. The point of the work, the reason why the work is so great, is that it continues in this undercurrent through everything else that we've loaded on top of it. Specifically, forgiveness. One of the things people don't seem to think about very often when it comes to forgiveness is the fact that it has very great benefits for the one doing the forgiving. Yes, it is wonderful to seek forgiveness. That shows you are making a decision, you are changing your mind, you're trying to change your approach to how you grow going forward. There is a benefit to receiving that forgiveness because it feels like you can put that obstacle behind you. But also for the one doing the forgiving. If there was an obstacle that I have forgiven for, that obstacle is gone for me too. There is a benefit to being the one doing the forgiving. There is a capacity for growth that becomes possible because I have done the forgiving. All right. I want to talk about, I've done all this to sort of lay the foundation for trying to broaden understanding of the depth and breadth of God's power. Everything I've said up until now is just to try and set a reference point for you. I may be wrong about half of it, all of it, some of it, none of it. All I'm trying to do is create an environment for you to get this next part. This is about God's power. I am a human being. Granted, I spend a lot more time in meditation than most human beings. I meditate on subjects that most human beings would rather just ignore in general, or just be glad they understand what they do and just run with that. Hell, they will kill for the limited understanding they have if somebody disagrees with them. That's just how humans work. But I, in my capacity, am capable of envisioning multiple realities when it comes to the many worlds theories and all its petty derivations. I mean, there are a lot of derivations to the many worlds theories. And to meditate on those subjects is reasonably not something everybody should do because they are abstract, they are highly specific, and they don't have any real world tangible gains for anybody. They won't put food on your table. They won't make your plants grow. But in my mind, I can see and I can feel the texture of, and I can understand the principles behind the concepts of multiple realities, infinite multiple realities. I, in my mind, can feel the texture and the taste and the smell and the understanding of other dimensionality. And these are just two examples. If, as somebody as simple and ununique as me, can do these things, how much greater is the understanding of that Creator God who made all of that possible? And why? Why did he do that? Why the mental replicator? What would be the point for an eternal being with that kind of access to that kind of power? Why create or spread that mental replicator? And okay, I won't get to that yet, but understand that if I can picture it, if I can understand it in my limited capacity, how much more powerful is it for the person who made that happen, who maintains that as it happens now? I don't think we properly respect the kind of power that we are talking about here. The kind of power we're talking about here is somebody that envisioned and created and continually utilizes a physical replicator in DNA. That is just something that is in their toolbox. The power we are talking about is something that utilizes the mental replicator, memetics. Not only utilizes it, but look at the history on our planet when it comes to that replicator. That replicator was born out of a scientific religion that grew out of the discovery of the first replicator in DNA. The genetic replicator DNA was discovered, and it went through history, and it permeated all the minds, and the minds theorized, and they grew the subject, leading to Richard Dawkins, who is vehemently opposed to God. I watched him, and at the time I was in his camp, cheered for him giving a TED talk about militant atheism and how that is something we should do. This man is in his mimetic structure, in his conscious mind, he is opposed. He is in opposition to what I am trying to discuss to you right now, the divine power, the divine mind. And he is the tool that God used to illustrate to us his second replicator. I don't think if you don't understand this, you don't know what kind of a slap to the face this must be for somebody whose conscious structure is geared to disprove one thing, and whose greatest work turns out to be one of the greatest contributions to God's plan that there has been. Darwin and his people had a great contribution. Dawkins had an incredible equal contribution to Darwin. And it is in God's plan. Look at the power in that. Look at the invincibility of that. Because Richard Dawkins has a very powerful mind, or had. I heard something happened to him, but that powerful mind was set in opposition and then turned to utilize it for the greater good of the plan it was set in opposition of. Maybe I'm not articulating this well. Speaking is not my thing, but I just want you to understand the power of that. And I said earlier that Jesus didn't describe genetic replicators. He didn't describe mental replicators. He didn't touch on the topic that they were walking over oceans of freaking oil that would one day revolutionize this freaking planet. But what he did was speak in metaphor. And he used his replicator masterfully. When all of his disciples and everybody they interacted with were all missing the point, he was still doing it masterfully, to such a degree that we can now look back on the historical record and respect the work that he did. That is incredible. The usage of that power is almost laid back. Like, I know I am very powerful, but this is how I am choosing, this is how I have to interact with you. I don't think that we respect the power that was shown there in that work. Not nearly enough. Not nearly enough. This talk is on the power of divinity, on God's power. I cannot give you specific guidelines and parameters to define that power, because our scientific revolution was started to better understand that power, to better empathize with that power. And this is historically where we are into that revolution. We can discover so many intricacies that just magnify the amount of power that we can see in God. But I can't define it for you perfectly. I'm only trying to lay the groundwork so that you can gain a better respect for it, a better recognition of how it was used for us. And I'm going to go from this talk into a discussion about human power, human energy, or vibes. Hopefully, I've given you a new concept to consider. Hopefully, I've helped you expand on concepts you are already considering. The point of this is that my mind is not unique, that my mind is going to make mistakes, but my mind is also going to make discoveries. Simultaneous as this discovery is being made all over the world at the same time, because that's how the growth of mind works. I saw this talk the other day about somebody who had an idea for an invention, and they didn't do anything about that idea. But somebody else had the same idea and made the same invention, and it could make one feel like their ideas, their mental work, had been usurped or stolen. But how this stuff works is I am having these ideas, I'm trying to do these explanations, I'm trying to do this, but it is not just my mind that is doing this. It is just that time in our mind's development for that idea to occur to people. It's not occurring just to me, it's occurring to lots of people. I know that if my work is to have value, it is to expand how your mind is growing. First, I show you how it's growing in my definition of consciousness and showing you how that works. And then to give you examples as to profitable directions that you can grow your mind in intentionally. You don't have to agree with everything I've said. You don't even have to understand everything I've said. The point is to help you grow in the direction you're growing in, that you want, that you have chosen for your life. And I think that this subject, the subject of divine power, the Creator God, that is something that is worthy of taking a place in your mind as you grow it going forward. Hopefully I've given you an example in this talk as to why that is. Thank you.